I still remember the moment as if it were carved into my soul. That ordinary Monday morning at my office in Washington, D.C. turned into the day my entire world shattered. I was laughing with my colleagues, teasing them about how scatterbrained I was for mixing up my lunchbox with my son Benjamin's. But when I handed the container to David Miller, my closest colleague and a former doctor, the smile drained from his face. He rubbed the rim of the container with his finger, stared at it under the fluorescent lights, and suddenly froze. His hands trembled violently. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice breaking, "you must take your son to the hospital right now." Everyone in the office went silent. My blood turned to ice. "Why?" I asked in terror. "What is it?" David locked his pale eyes on mine. "I believe there's arsenic in this food." And when I finally saw with my own eyes what had been hidden inside Benjamin's lunchbox, I realized that my worst fear, the kind a mother prays never comes true, was standing right in front of me. My name is Margaret Wallace, and at 53 years old I'd built a life I was proud of. My perfume company, Essence of Margaret, had grown from a small passion project into a respected name in the industry. I'd created it from scratch after my husband Thomas passed away 15 years ago, pouring my grief into something beautiful. But my greatest pride was my son, Benjamin. At 32, he'd become everything a mother could hope for. Kind, intelligent, and successful as a finance director at a prestigious firm in downtown D.C. "Mom, you really didn't have to bring dinner again," Benjamin said one evening as I arrived at his townhouse, carrying a basket of freshly baked rolls and a pot of my signature beef stew. "Nonsense," I replied, setting the food down on his granite kitchen counter. "It's Tuesday. Tuesday is our dinner night." The house was immaculate as always. Clara, my daughter-in-law of 3 years, kept everything in perfect order. She emerged from the hallway, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, wearing a crisp white blouse and tailored pants. "Margaret!" she exclaimed, rushing to embrace me. Her perfume, not one of mine, I noted, wafted around us. "You're spoiling us again. I was just about to start cooking." "Well, now you don't have to," I smiled, returning her hug. Something about her embrace always felt rehearsed, but I pushed the thought away. After all, not everyone shows affection the same way. Clara and Benjamin had met at a charity gala 4 years ago. She was working in pharmaceutical sales at the time, and her knowledge of chemistry had impressed him. Their courtship had been swift, and before I knew it, I was planning their wedding. As we sat down to dinner, I couldn't help but notice how tired Benjamin looked. The circles under his eyes had deepened over the past few months, and he'd lost weight. "Are you feeling all right, sweetheart?" I asked, passing him a basket of rolls. "Just work stress," he replied with a dismissive wave. "We're in the middle of a big merger." Clara placed her hand over his. "I've been telling him to see a doctor, Margaret. He's been having these terrible stomach aches too." "It's nothing," Benjamin insisted, though I caught him wincing slightly as he shifted in his chair. "I probably just need more sleep." "Well, I've been giving him these herbal teas," Clara added. "My grandmother used to make them for digestive issues. They seem to help a little." The conversation shifted to my company. Clara leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. "So, Margaret, how are the expansion plans going? Benjamin mentioned you were thinking about opening another location." "We're still in the early stages," I replied, noticing how her gaze intensified whenever business was mentioned. "The property in Georgetown looks promising, but there's a lot to consider." "And it would all go to Benjamin eventually, right?" she asked, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp. "I mean, it's such a wonderful legacy you've built." Something in her question made me uncomfortable. "Well, yes, though I plan to be running things for quite a while yet," I laughed, trying to lighten the moment. "Of course," Clara exclaimed. "I didn't mean, we want you around forever, don't we, Benjamin?" Benjamin nodded absently, rubbing his stomach again. Later that evening, as Clara cleared the dishes, I helped Benjamin with the leftovers. "She's quite interested in the business," I remarked quietly. "She's just proud of what you've built, Mom," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She knows how much it means to me, to us." I watched as Clara efficiently packed containers, her movements precise. She looked up and caught me watching, flashing a brilliant smile that somehow didn't reach her eyes. "I'll pack some lunch for tomorrow for both of you," she announced. "Benjamin, your usual, and Margaret, I'll make you a special salad with that dressing you liked last time." "You're too kind," I replied. though I couldn't recall a special dressing I'd particularly enjoyed. As I drove home that night, I reflected on how fortunate I was. A successful business, a wonderful son and a daughter-in-law who seemed to care so much about our family. Yet something nagged at me, a feeling I couldn't quite name. The next morning, I awoke to a text from Clara. "Left a surprise in your lunch today. Enjoy." It was a small thing, but it made me smile. Perhaps I was being unfair in my judgments. Clara was trying her best to be part of the family. When I arrived at my office building, David was already there, cup of coffee in hand, as he reviewed reports. At 60, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he'd been with me almost since the beginning. "Morning, Margaret," he greeted. "Ready for the distribution meeting?" "As I'll ever be," I sighed, setting down my purse and the lunch container on my desk. The day proceeded normally, until lunchtime. I reached for the container, then paused, noticing the blue lid. "Oh no," I groaned. "I grabbed Benjamin's lunch by mistake. Mine has a green lid." David chuckled. "The perils of having someone pack your lunch. What did Clara make for the boy today?" "Let's see," I said, popping open the lid. Inside was a beautifully arranged meal, grilled chicken, rice, and steamed vegetables. "Looks delicious, actually. Benjamin eats better than I do." David peered over my shoulder. "That does look good, though the rice has an odd sheen to it." He reached forward, running his finger along the edge of the container where some residue clung, and that's when everything changed. I watched in confusion as David's expression transformed from casual interest to horrified realization. His hands began to shake, and he stepped back as if he'd been burned. "Margaret," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "you need to take your son to the hospital immediately." "What? Why?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. "There's a white residue here," he said, his medical training evident in his rapid assessment. "The metallic smell, the oily sheen. I've seen this before in my medical days. I believe it's arsenic." "Arsenic?" I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "But that's poison." "Yes," David confirmed grimly, "and if Benjamin's been eating food with this in it regularly—" The implication hung in the air between us, too terrible to voice aloud. In that moment, as the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and my colleagues looked on in confusion, one thought crystallized with terrible clarity. The only person who prepared Benjamin's meals was Clara, my daughter-in-law, the woman I'd welcomed into my family with open arms. My hands trembled as I dialed Benjamin's number, praying he hadn't eaten his lunch yet. When his voicemail answered, panic surged through me. "We need to go to him now," I told David, grabbing my purse. "His office is only 15 minutes away." "I'm coming with you," David insisted, his medical background suddenly the most valuable asset I could imagine. "And Margaret, bring that container. We'll need it tested." The drive to Benjamin's office building was a blur of red lights and honking horns as I weaved through DC traffic with reckless determination. All I could think about was my son, possibly ingesting poison at that very moment. We found Benjamin in his office, hunched over his desk, looking pale and drawn. He glanced up in surprise as we burst in. "Mum, what are you—" "Don't eat your lunch," I interrupted, breathless. "The one Clara packed. Have you eaten it?" Confusion crossed his face. "No, I was just about to. What's going on?" Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. I explained David's suspicions as gently as I could, watching my son's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to horror. "That's impossible," he said, shaking his head. "Clara wouldn't. She couldn't." But I could see the doubt forming in his eyes, connecting dots he'd been too loyal to connect before. "The stomach pains," he whispered. "They always get worse after meals at home." David stepped forward. "Benjamin, we need to get you to a hospital immediately. If there's arsenic in your system, even in small amounts over time, it can cause serious damage." Within an hour, we were at the University of Maryland Medical Center. Dr. Ethan Roberts, a toxicologist recommended by David, listened gravely to our story before ordering immediate tests. "Arsenic poisoning is often overlooked because its symptoms mimic other conditions," he explained, as a nurse drew Benjamin's blood. "Fatigue, headaches, confusion, stomach pain, they could be anything from stress to poor diet." "But if someone was deliberately poisoning him?" I asked, the words still feeling surreal as they left my lips. Dr. Roberts's expression darkened. "Then we'd likely see elevated levels in his system. It builds up over time. The good news is, if caught early enough, we can treat it. As Benjamin underwent tests, David and I sat in the sterile waiting room, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. I should have seen it, I whispered, staring at my hands. All the signs were there. What signs, Margaret? David asked gently. Benjamin's declining health, Clara's interest in my will and the company, the way she always insisted on preparing his food. I looked up, tears forming. I was so desperate to believe I had the perfect daughter-in-law that I ignored my instincts. David placed his hand over mine. Don't blame yourself. People like that, they're expert manipulators. They know exactly how to appear trustworthy. But why? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since David first identified. The poison. What could she possibly gain? Before David could answer, Dr. Roberts appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Miss Wallace, could I speak with you and Benjamin together? Benjamin was sitting up in the hospital bed when we entered, looking smaller somehow against the white sheets. The preliminary tests show elevated arsenic levels in your system, Dr. Roberts stated without preamble. Not immediately life-threatening, but concerning. You've been exposed to small amounts over time, consistent with what we'd see in deliberate poisoning. Benjamin's face crumpled. So it's true, he whispered. Clara's been poisoning me? We can't say who did it, Dr. Roberts cautioned, but someone has been introducing arsenic into your food, and based on the samples from the lunchbox, it appears today's dose was significantly larger than what you've been receiving. The implication hung heavy in the air. Clara had been escalating. I need to call the police, I said, reaching for my phone with shaking hands. Wait, Benjamin said, his voice stronger than it had been all day. We need to think this through. If we confront her now, without proof, I repeated incredulously. Benjamin, your blood tests and the food sample show I've been poisoned, he finished, but they don't prove who did it. Clara could claim someone else tampered with the food or that it was accidental contamination. As much as it pained me to admit it, he was right. Clara was clever, too clever to be caught easily. We needed incontrovertible evidence. What do you suggest? I asked. Benjamin's eyes, so like his father's, hardened with resolve. We need to catch her in the act, and to do that, I need to go home and pretend I don't suspect a thing. Absolutely not, I protested. I'm not letting you go back to that house with her. Ms. Wallace, Dr. Roberts interjected, we can start chelation therapy to remove the arsenic from Benjamin's system, but he's... Right, if you want to build a case, you'll need more evidence. I'll be careful, Mom, Benjamin promised. I won't eat anything she prepares, but we need to understand why she's doing this. That evening, after Benjamin was discharged with strict instructions for monitoring and follow-up, I called my lawyer while Benjamin rested in my guest room. Margaret, it's been a while. Arthur Goldstein's familiar voice greeted me. What can I do for you? Arthur, I need to know the details of my will, I said without preamble, specifically regarding Benjamin and Clara. There was a pause. Well, as it stands now, your estate is divided equally between Benjamin and Clara. The business goes primarily to Benjamin, but Clara receives a substantial portion. And if Benjamin were to predecease you, Clara would inherit everything. My blood ran cold. When was this last updated? About 2 years ago, shortly after their marriage. You were quite insistent that Clara be included as an equal beneficiary, don't you remember? I did, vaguely. Clara had been so attentive then, so interested in the business. She'd made comments about wanting to learn everything, to be part of the family legacy. I'd been touched by her apparent devotion. Arthur, I need to change it immediately. Margaret, what's going on? He asked, concern evident in his voice. I took a deep breath and told him everything. By morning, my revised will was being drawn up, and Benjamin and I had formulated a plan. We would gather evidence, build a case, and ensure that Clara could never harm anyone again. But as I watched my son sleep fitfully in my guest room, I was haunted by one terrible thought. If I hadn't taken the wrong lunch that day, how much longer would it have been before Benjamin's mysterious illness became fatal? And what kind of mother was I to have invited the wolf so willingly into our home? The next morning I awoke to the sound of my phone vibrating frantically on the nightstand. Clara's name flashed across the screen, the 7th missed call since midnight. I stared at it, my stomach churning with disgust and rage. Are you going to answer? Benjamin asked from the doorway of my guest room, his voice hoarse. Despite the chelation treatment beginning to flush the poison from his system, he looked pale, his once vibrant eyes now shadowed with betrayal. "I have to," I replied, steeling myself. "If we want to catch her, we need to play along," I answered on the 8th ring, forcing a tremor into my voice. "Clara? What's wrong?" "Margaret. Thank God." Her voice was pitched high with what sounded like genuine panic. "Benjamin didn't come home last night. I've been worried sick. I called hospitals, police stations." "He's with me," I interrupted, impressed despite myself at her performance. "He started feeling awful at work yesterday, worse than usual. I picked him up and brought him to my place." There was a pause, and I could almost hear her calculating, reassessing. "Oh, why didn't either of you call me? I've been frantic." "It was late and he just wanted to sleep," I said, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. "The doctor thinks it might be some kind of food poisoning." Another pause. "Food poisoning? But we ate the same dinner." "These things affect people differently," I replied, amazed at how easily the lies came when protecting someone you love. "Anyway, he's resting. I'll have him call you when he wakes up." "I'm coming over," she announced decisively. "No," I said too quickly. "I mean, the doctor said he needs complete rest. No visitors. I'll keep you updated, I promise." After more protests and reassurances, I finally ended the call, my hand shaking as I set down the phone. "She's good," Benjamin said quietly. "If I didn't know better, I'd believe she was genuinely concerned." "That's what makes her so dangerous," I replied. "Now we need to move quickly. Inspector Carter will be here at 10. Inspector James Carter from D.C. Metropolitan Police arrived precisely on time, his weathered face impassive as we laid out our suspicions and evidence. He examined the food container, still sealed in a plastic bag, with gloved hands. "We'll have this analyzed immediately," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. "But I should warn you, domestic poisoning cases are complicated. Without direct evidence of her administering the substance, that's why we need your help," I insisted. "We need surveillance, proof." Carter considered this, his eyes darting between Benjamin and me. "What you're suggesting, surveillance in a private home, requires warrants, justification. The food sample and blood tests are a start, but judges want more." "Then what do you suggest?" Benjamin asked, frustration edging his voice. "A controlled operation," Carter replied after a moment. "We place hidden cameras in key areas of your home, particularly the kitchen. But we need your cooperation, Mr. Wallace. You'll need to return home, maintain normalcy, while being extremely careful about what you consume." Benjamin nodded grimly. "I'll do whatever it takes." The plan was set in motion with terrifying efficiency. Within 48 hours, tiny cameras were discreetly installed in Benjamin and Clara's kitchen, dining room and pantry, while she was at a lunch meeting that Benjamin had arranged with mutual friends to keep her occupied. "The cameras are virtually undetectable," Carter assured us. "They'll feed directly to our surveillance team. If she attempts anything, we'll have it recorded." That evening, Benjamin returned home to Clara, armed with a convincing story about a stomach virus and instructions from me to rest up and let Clara take care of you. I watched him leave my apartment with my heart in my throat, feeling like I was sending my son into a lion's den. 3 agonizing days passed. Benjamin carefully avoided eating anything Clara prepared, claiming his stomach was still sensitive, subsisting on sealed protein bars he kept hidden in his briefcase, and meals he bought directly from restaurants. Each night he called me with updates, his voice increasingly strained as he maintained the charade. "She's getting frustrated that I'm not eating her food," he reported on the 4th night. "Today she made this big show of preparing chicken soup, said it would help my stomach heal, when I said I wasn't. Hungry?" Something flashed across her face, something cold. "Be careful," I whispered, fear clawing at my chest. "Don't provoke her." On the 5th day, Inspector Carter called me at work, his voice taut with urgency. "We've got it," he said without preamble. "This morning after your son left for work, she went to the garage, retrieved something from behind a loose brick in the wall, a small vial. We have her on camera adding the substance to a smoothie, then sealing it in a container marked with your son's name." My legs gave way, and I sank into my office chair. "You're certain?" "Beyond doubt. We've dispatched officers to secure the container before your son returns home. We'll arrest her this evening when both of you are present. The district attorney wants maximum impact, and your son's testimony will be crucial." The rest of the day passed in a fog. David stayed with me, his steady presence keeping me from falling apart completely. At 6 o'clock, Inspector Carter called again. "We're in position outside your son's home. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. Yes. The drive to Benjamin's townhouse was surreal. Police vehicles were parked discreetly around the corner, out of sight from the house. Carter met us at the end of the block, his expression grave. "Here's what's going to happen," he explained. "Mr. Wallace will enter first as normal. You'll follow a few minutes later, Ms. Wallace. You're checking in on your son, nothing unusual. Our officers will move in once we have verbal confirmation." Benjamin squeezed my hand. "It's almost over, Mom." I watched him walk toward the house, his shoulders squared with a courage I could barely comprehend. My son walking back into the home of the woman who had methodically tried to kill him. 5 minutes later, I followed, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure Clara would hear it the moment I entered. The house was warm, filled with the aroma of something delicious baking. The domestic scene was so at odds with the horror we knew lurked beneath. Clara greeted me with her usual perfect smile, though I noticed a tightness around her eyes. "Margaret, what a nice surprise. I just made Benjamin's favorite lasagna. He's finally feeling well enough to eat a proper meal." "That's wonderful," I managed, hanging my coat in the hallway. "Where is he?" "Upstairs changing," she replied, turning back to the kitchen. "Dinner's almost ready. Will you stay?" "I'd love to," I said, following her. On the counter sat a bottle of red wine, already opened. "That looks nice." "A special vintage," Clara said, reaching for 3 glasses, "to celebrate Benjamin's recovery." As she poured, I noticed her hands were perfectly steady. No hint of guilt, no tremor of conscience. This woman, who had married my son and systematically poisoned him for years, was completely at ease with her monstrous actions. "Clara," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "I've been meaning to talk to you about my will." Her head snapped up, interest immediately piqued. "Oh?" "Yes, I've been thinking about the company's future, about who should control it if anything were to happen to Benjamin or me." A flash of something, calculation, eagerness, crossed her face before she composed herself. "That's certainly important to consider, but hardly dinner conversation, Margaret." "On the contrary," I replied, as Benjamin appeared in the doorway behind her. "I think it's exactly what we should discuss tonight." Clara turned, registering Benjamin's presence, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Darling, you're just in time. I was about to serve dinner." "Actually," Benjamin said quietly, "I think we should talk first." Clara's facade flickered momentarily. "About what?" "About arsenic," he said simply. "About why you've been putting it in my food." The wine glass Clara had been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. Red liquid spread like blood across the pristine tile. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her composure cracking for the first time. That's insane." "Is it?" I stepped forward, my fear replaced by cold determination. "We have the evidence, Clara. Blood tests showing arsenic poisoning, food samples, and as of this morning, video of you adding it to Benjamin's smoothie." Clara's face transformed, beauty melting away to reveal something ugly and desperate. "You can't prove anything." "They already have," Inspector Carter said, appearing in the doorway with 2 uniformed officers. "Clara Wallace, you're under arrest for attempted murder." As the officers moved forward, Clara's composure shattered completely. "You don't understand," she hissed, backing away. "Everything I did was for us, Benjamin. Your mother would have given it all away to charity. She told me so. All that money, the company, it should be ours." "By killing me?" Benjamin asked, his voice breaking. "That was your solution?" "Not killing," she spat, desperate now. "Just making you sick enough that she'd change her will to include me directly. But she never would. It was always about you, her precious son. I was nothing to her, just a means to her." "Grandchildren." As the officers handcuffed her, Clara locked eyes with me, hatred blazing. "You were always suspicious of me, weren't you, Margaret? Always watching, judging. Well, I saw through you too. Your perfect mother act, your controlling ways. You never wanted to share him." I stood still, refusing to be baited as they led her away. Only when the front door closed behind them did I allow myself to crumple, Benjamin catching me before I hit the floor. "It's over," he whispered, holding me as I sobbed. "It's finally over." But as we clung to each other in the kitchen, still filled with the aroma of the poisoned meal she'd prepared, I knew it wasn't over. It was merely the beginning of a long, painful recovery, not just from poison, but from the deepest betrayal imaginable. The weeks following Clara's arrest, passed in a haze of police statements, medical appointments, and sleepless nights. Benjamin moved back into my guest room, unable to face the townhouse he'd shared with Clara. Each night, I'd hear him pacing, his footsteps a rhythmic reminder of our collective trauma. The evidence against Clara mounted daily. Police searches uncovered a hidden cache of arsenic in the garage exactly where Inspector Carter's cameras had shown her retrieving it. Her internet search history revealed queries about untraceable poisons, arsenic symptoms, and inheritance laws in D.C. Most damning of all were the text messages recovered from her phone exchanged with a friend. "Soon I won't have to worry about money ever again. M's company will be mine, one way or another." As Benjamin's health slowly improved with continued treatment, the emotional wounds proved harder to heal. "How did I not see it?" he asked one evening as we sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the D.C. skyline in gold and crimson. 3 years, Mom. 3 years I shared my life, my bed, my home with someone who was slowly killing me. I reached for his hand, noticing how the tremors, a lingering effect of the arsenic, had finally begun to subside. Love blinds us, especially when the deception is so calculated. "It wasn't just the poisoning," he continued, his voice hollow. "It was everything else. The way she isolated me from friends. How she always had a reason I shouldn't visit you alone. The surprise lunches at work so I wouldn't eat out with colleagues." He laughed. Bitterly. Classic abuser tactics, and I never recognized them. "Because she was smart," I said firmly. "This isn't your fault, Benjamin." He turned to me, his eyes swimming with unshed tears. "When did you first suspect?" I considered lying, protecting him from the knowledge that I'd had inklings long before the poisoning was discovered, but we'd had enough deception. "There were moments," I admitted. "Comments about the will, the way she monitored your food, how your health seemed to worsen after every weekend at home, then improve during business trips. But I dismissed them because—" I paused, struggling with my own guilt. "Because you wanted to believe I was happy," Benjamin finished softly. "Yes," I whispered, "and because I was afraid of losing you if I voiced my concerns." The legal proceedings moved forward with surprising speed. The district attorney, convinced by the overwhelming evidence, offered Clara a plea deal, 25 years instead of life imprisonment. To our shock, she refused, insisting on a trial. "She wants the publicity," Arthur explained during one of our many meetings. "Her lawyer is planning an insanity defense. They'll claim she suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, that she genuinely believed making Benjamin sick was somehow helping him." "That's ridiculous," I sputtered. "The financial motive is clear as day." Arthur nodded grimly. "Indeed, but trials are unpredictable, and juries can be swayed by attractive, seemingly respectable defendants. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for October, giving us 3 months to prepare." Detective Carter became a regular visitor, updating us on the investigation's progress and preparing Benjamin for his testimony. "The defense will try to paint you as an inattentive husband," he warned Benjamin during one session. "They'll suggest you were having affairs, that Clara was emotionally unstable because of your behavior." Benjamin's face hardened. "Let them try. I have nothing to hide." As the hearing approached, I noticed subtle changes in Benjamin. The initial shock and betrayal were gradually being replaced by something more resolute. He began jogging again, short distances at first, then longer as his strength returned. He started therapy, committed to understanding how he'd become ensnared in such a toxic relationship. Most significantly, he decided to sell the townhouse. "I can't live there again," he explained as we toured a bright apartment overlooking the Potomac. "Every corner holds a memory of her." "It's a fresh start," I agreed, watching as he moved through the sunlit space with increasing confidence. The day before the preliminary hearing, Benjamin invited me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant we'd frequented before Clara entered our lives. As we settled into our corner table, I noticed he seemed different, lighter somehow. "I've been thinking about the company," he began after we'd ordered. "About the future." A flicker of concern passed through me. "Benjamin, there's no rush to think about that now. You need to focus on your recovery." "That's just it," he said, leaning forward. "This experience has changed me, Mom. Made me reevaluate everything. The truth is, I've never been passionate about the perfume business. I went along with your plans because I didn't want to disappoint you." I felt a stab of guilt. Had I been pushing my dreams onto him, just as Thomas had once warned I might? I had no idea, I admitted. You always seemed so engaged. I was engaged because it mattered to you, he explained gently. But I've realized life's too precious to spend it fulfilling someone else's vision, even someone I love as much as you. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to inherit the company, at least not to run it. I'd like to explore other paths. My brush with death has clarified what really matters to me. I sat back, absorbing his words. My initial instinct was disappointment, even hurt. But looking at my son, truly seeing him perhaps for the first time in years, I recognized the gift we'd been given. Not just his life spared, but this opportunity for honesty. What does matter to you, Benjamin? I asked softly. His eyes lit up. Teaching. I've always loved it. Even at the finance firm, mentoring the junior analysts was my favorite part. I've applied to a master's program in education. At Georgetown. Teaching, I repeated, letting the idea settle. I can see that. You have your father's patience. You're not disappointed. I reached across the table, taking his hand. How could I be disappointed in you choosing happiness? If this ordeal has taught us anything, it's that life is too short for anything less. As we finished our meal, a sense of peace settled over me for the first time since that fateful day in my office. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of a difficult legal battle. Clara's betrayal had left wounds that would take years to fully heal. But sitting across from my son, seeing the renewed purpose in his eyes, I knew we would survive this, perhaps even emerge stronger. To new beginnings, I said, raising my water glass. Benjamin smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. To truth, he countered, and to the lunch mix-up that saved my life. As we clinked glasses, I silently thanked whatever fate or divine intervention had led me to grab the wrong container that morning. Sometimes salvation comes in the most unexpected packages, even a poisoned lunch. The courthouse steps loomed before us, a gauntlet of reporters and camera flashes we would have to navigate. Benjamin straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and squeezed my hand. "Ready?" he asked, his voice steadier than it had been in months. I nodded, drawing strength from his composure. Together, we ascended the steps side by side, ignoring the shouted questions and the hungry lenses capturing our every expression. Inside, the marble halls echoed with footsteps and whispered conversations that ceased as we passed. The case had captured public attention. The wealthy perfume company owner's son, poisoned by his beautiful, scheming wife. It read like a tabloid headline, except we were living it. Courtroom 3B was already filling when we entered. Arthur Goldstein rose to greet us, his grey suit immaculate, his expression confident. "The prosecution is well prepared," he assured us quietly. "Clara's financial motives are clear, the evidence overwhelming. Try not to be rattled by her presence or her legal team's tactics." I nodded, but my attention was drawn to the defense table where Clara sat beside her attorney, Diane Mercer, a notorious defender known for securing improbable acquittals. Clara wore a modest navy dress, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looking more like a schoolteacher than a would-be murderer. As if sensing my gaze, she turned, her eyes meeting mine with chilling emptiness before her lips curved into a small, enigmatic smile. "All rise." Judge Patricia Lawson entered, a formidable woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes that surveyed the courtroom with practiced efficiency. After the formalities, District Attorney James Wilson approached the bench for his opening statement. "Your Honor, members of the jury," he began, his deep voice resonating through the hushed room, "this case is about betrayal in its most insidious form. Clara Wallace methodically poisoned her husband with arsenic over a period of years, escalating her efforts as her greed and impatience grew. The evidence will show that she researched untraceable poisons, purchased arsenic under false pretenses, and administered it through her husband's food with the intent to gain control of the Wallace family business and fortune." He laid out the timeline meticulously. Benjamin's declining health coinciding with their marriage, the escalating symptoms, the financial motivations, and finally, the damning video evidence of Clara adding the poison to Benjamin's food. Throughout his presentation, I stole glances at the jury, trying to gauge their reactions. Several looked disturbed, particularly as Wilson displayed Benjamin's medical charts showing the arsenic accumulation. When Diane Mercer rose for the defense's opening statement, she moved with practiced grace, her voice melodic and persuasive. "Ladies and gentlemen, what the..." Prosecution has presented is a narrative crafted from circumstantial evidence and speculation. The truth is far more complex and, yes, tragic. She paused, her gaze sweeping the jury box. Clara Wallace suffers from a severe psychological condition, factitious disorder imposed on another, commonly known as Munchausen syndrome by proxy. This disorder compelled her to make her husband ill, not out of malice or greed, but from a profound psychological need to then care for him and be seen as the devoted wife. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. I felt Benjamin stiffen beside me. "We will demonstrate," Mercer continued, "that Clara's actions, while undeniably harmful, stemmed not from criminal intent, but from mental illness requiring treatment, not imprisonment." The prosecution's narrative of financial motive ignores Clara's own successful career and the genuine love she felt for her husband. I nearly laughed aloud at the absurdity. Genuine love. The woman had been systematically killing my son. Over the next 3 days, the prosecution built its case methodically. Medical experts confirmed the arsenic poisoning. Financial analysts detailed Clara's growing debt, despite her successful career, and her numerous inquiries about Benjamin's and my finances. Digital forensics experts presented her damning search history. Then came the video evidence. The courtroom fell silent as the footage played, clearly showing Clara retrieving a vial from behind the loose brick, carefully measuring a white powder, and stirring it into Benjamin's smoothie. The calculated precision of her movements, the way she glanced over her shoulder to ensure she wasn't observed, it was chilling in its deliberation. "That is not the behavior of someone mentally ill," Wilson emphasized. "That is the careful, deliberate action of someone who knew exactly what she was doing and was taking pains to avoid detection." On the 4th day, Benjamin took the stand. I watched with a mother's mixture of pride and anguish as he recounted their marriage, the gradual isolation from friends and family, his worsening health, and the devastating realization that the woman he had loved was killing him. "When did you first suspect your wife might be poisoning you?" Wilson asked. Benjamin's gaze briefly flickered to Clara before returning to the prosecutor. "I didn't, not until my mother accidentally took my lunch to work, and her colleague, a former doctor, identified potential arsenic contamination. Until that moment, I trusted Clara completely." During cross-examination, Mercer approached Benjamin with rehearsed sympathy. "Mr. Wallace, would you say you were an attentive husband?" "I believed I was," Benjamin replied carefully. "Yet you worked long hours, traveled frequently for business, and by your own admission were often too tired for social engagements your wife arranged. Isn't that correct?" Benjamin frowned slightly. "My work schedule was demanding, yes, but... And isn't it true that in the months before your mother's dramatic discovery, you had been discussing the possibility of divorce with a close colleague?" A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. I stared at Benjamin, shocked. This was the first I'd heard of any divorce considerations. "I mentioned growing concerns about my marriage to one friend," Benjamin admitted, "but I never formally consulted a divorce attorney or made definite plans. Because despite your unhappiness, Clara took care of you, didn't she? She managed your home, prepared your meals, nurtured you through your mysterious illnesses?" "She poisoned me," Benjamin stated flatly. "That's not nurturing, that's attempted murder." When my turn came to testify, I steeled myself against Clara's unwavering stare. I recounted my growing suspicions, the fateful lunch mix-up, and the horrifying revelation that followed. "Ms. Wallace," Wilson asked, "had you discussed your will and estate plans with Clara?" "Yes," I confirmed. "She showed particular interest in the company's valuation and succession plans. She frequently asked about my retirement timeline and whether I planned to leave everything to Benjamin." "And did you intend to leave your estate to your son?" "Not entirely," I admitted. "I've always planned to donate a portion to charitable foundations supporting women entrepreneurs." Clara seemed displeased when I mentioned this. Mercer's cross-examination was predictably aggressive. "Ms. Wallace, isn't it true that you never fully accepted Clara into your family, that you maintained a certain distance?" "I welcomed her warmly," I countered, keeping my voice steady. "I included her in family traditions, consulted her on business matters, treated her as a daughter. Yet you kept your charitable intentions secret from her until after the marriage." "They weren't secret. They simply didn't come up in conversation until later." "Convenient," Mercer remarked dryly. "Ms. Wallace, Would you describe yourself as protective of your son? Any mother would be. Perhaps overly protective? Did you perhaps resent sharing Benjamin's affection with another woman? I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but maintained my composure. I was delighted that Benjamin had found someone to love. My only concern was his happiness. Yet you readily believed the worst of Clara when the opportunity arose. One lunch container and a former doctor's amateur assessment were enough for you to accuse your daughter-in-law of attempted murder. The evidence spoke for itself, I replied firmly. The medical tests confirmed it. As I stepped down from the witness stand, Clara's eyes followed me, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment I wondered what twisted justification she had created in her mind for her actions. What narrative allowed her to sleep at night, knowing she was slowly killing the man who loved her? The trial's most dramatic moment came when Clara herself took the stand. Gone was the sophisticated, confident woman who had charmed her way into our lives. In her place sat a fragile-looking figure, her voice soft and occasionally breaking as she recounted a childhood of neglect and psychological abuse. "I always wanted to be a caregiver," she explained, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "To heal, to nurture. When Benjamin got sick, I felt needed, important." "Did you deliberately add substances to Benjamin's food?" Mercer asked directly. Clara lowered her eyes. I think I must have, but it wasn't to hurt him. Not really. I wanted to take care of him, to nurse him back to health. When he was ill, he needed me completely. And the financial discussions with Margaret, the interest in the will. That was natural curiosity, Clara insisted. Any wife would want to understand her husband's inheritance. I loved Benjamin. I still do. I never wanted him to die. During cross-examination, Wilson was merciless. "Mrs. Wallace, if your motive was merely to make your husband temporarily ill so you could nurture him, why increase the dosage of arsenic over time? Why research untraceable poisons and inheritance laws simultaneously?" Clara's composure slipped momentarily. I don't remember doing that. You don't remember typing, "How long does arsenic poisoning take to kill?" into your search engine? Or, "How to inherit business if spouse dies before parent?" "I was researching for a novel," she attempted, her voice losing its vulnerable quality. "I've always wanted to write mystery fiction." "A novel?" Wilson repeated skeptically. "Yet you never mentioned this literary aspiration to anyone. Not your husband, not your friends. No drafts were found on your computer. No notes." "I was in the planning stages," Clara insisted, a flash of her true self, calculating, quick-witted, showing through the cultivated fragility. As the trial progressed, expert witnesses for both sides battled over Clara's mental state. The defense's psychiatrist diagnosed her with factitious disorder imposed on another, painting her as a victim of her own psychology. The prosecution's expert systematically dismantled this theory, pointing to Clara's calculated behavior, financial motivations, and complete lack of remorse as evidence of antisocial personality disorder, not a mental illness that would diminish her responsibility. By the time closing arguments arrived, 2 weeks later, I was emotionally exhausted. The daily confrontation with Clara, the rehashing of Benjamin's poisoning, the defense's attempts to paint me as a controlling, jealous mother-in-law, it had taken its toll. Yet sitting in that courtroom, watching Benjamin's quiet strength, I felt a fierce pride. We had exposed the truth, whatever the outcome. Wilson's closing argument was powerful in its simplicity. This case is not about mental illness or misguided love. It is about a calculated attempt to gain wealth through murder. Clara Wallace poisoned her husband systematically, increasing the dosage when he didn't die quickly enough. She researched inheritance laws and untraceable poisons simultaneously. She hid the evidence. These are not the actions of someone mentally ill, but someone methodically pursuing wealth at the cost of a human life. As the jury filed out to begin deliberations, Benjamin and I braced ourselves for a long wait. But just 4 hours later, we were called back. The jury had reached a verdict. "Will the defendant please rise?" Clara stood beside her attorney, her posture perfect, her expression carefully composed to project vulnerability. Only the slight tremor in her clasped hands betrayed her anxiety. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find?" The jury forewoman, a retired schoolteacher with steel-grey hair, spoke clearly. "We find the defendant guilty." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Clara swayed slightly, her attorney's hand immediately steadying her elbow. Behind us, reporters scrambled toward the exits to break the news. On the charge of aggravated assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of administering a noxious substance with intent to injure, how do you find? Guilty. As the verdict was read, I reached for Benjamin's hand, his fingers interlaced with mine, warm and solid. We had done it. The truth had prevailed. Judge Lawson set the sentencing date for 3 weeks later and remanded Clara to custody. As she was led away, she turned once, her eyes seeking Benjamin's. Whatever she was looking for, forgiveness perhaps, or a final connection, she didn't find it. Benjamin stared straight ahead, refusing to meet her gaze. Outside the courthouse, we faced a wall of cameras and microphones. Arthur stepped forward, shielding us as best he could. Mr. and Ms. Wallace have no comment at this time. They ask for privacy as they begin to heal from this ordeal. Thank you. The drive home passed in contemplative silence. Only when we were safely inside my apartment did Benjamin finally speak. It doesn't feel the way I expected, he admitted, sinking onto the sofa. I thought I'd feel, I don't know, triumphant? Vindicated? Instead, I prompted gently. Instead, I just feel sad. For all of us. For the life I thought I had. For the person I thought she was. He looked up, his eyes troubled. Is that strange? No, I assured him, sitting beside him. It's human. You're mourning not just the marriage but the person you believed you married. That's a profound loss. Benjamin nodded slowly. I keep replaying moments, wondering if there were signs I missed, if the real Clara ever existed at all, or if everything was calculated from the beginning. We may never know, I said softly. Some people are so deeply damaged that they become expert at wearing masks. The important thing is that you survived. You're free now. The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later was brief but intense. Clara, now, dressed in prison orange, her hair pulled back severely, stood impassively as character witnesses testified to her manipulation and deceit. Previous boyfriends described suspicious illnesses. A former roommate recounted missing valuables and unexplained financial issues. When offered the opportunity to speak, Clara faced the judge with remarkable composure. Your Honor, I maintain that my actions were not driven by malice. I loved Benjamin, perhaps too much in ways that became destructive. I accept the jury's verdict, but I ask for leniency in recognition of my psychological issues. Judge Lawson considered her for a long moment before delivering her sentence. 30 years with possibility of parole after 20. Mrs. Wallace, she concluded, the calculated nature of your crimes, the extended period over which you poisoned your husband, and your complete lack of genuine remorse leave me no choice but to impose a sentence that reflects both the severity of your actions and the need to protect society from further harm you might cause. As Clara was led away, I felt a weight lifting, not completely, but enough to breathe more freely. It was over. She would pay for her crimes, and we could begin to rebuild. In the months that followed, Benjamin and I both worked to reclaim our lives. He began his master's program at Georgetown, throwing himself into education with unexpected passion. I hired a promising young executive to help manage the day-to-day operations of my company, giving me more time to develop new fragrances, something I hadn't done in years. One crisp autumn afternoon, Benjamin invited me to coffee at a small cafe near campus. As I approached, I spotted him at an outdoor table, deep in conversation with a woman I didn't recognize. She was perhaps in her early 30s, with short, dark hair and an animated way of speaking, her hands moving expressively as she talked. Benjamin spotted me and waved, a genuine smile lighting his face. As I reached their table, he stood to embrace me. Mom, this is Professor Olivia Chen. She teaches educational psychology in my program. Olivia, this is my mother, Margaret Wallace. Olivia extended her hand, her grip firm and warm. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Wallace. I've heard so much about you. All good, I promise. Please call me Margaret, I replied, immediately warming to her direct manner. And I'm delighted to meet one of Benjamin's professors. Actually, Benjamin interjected with a slight flush, Olivia and I were just discussing a research project I'm considering for next semester on trauma-informed teaching methods. As I joined them, it was impossible not to notice the easy rapport between them. The way Benjamin leaned forward when Olivia spoke, the respect and interest evident in her expression when he shared his ideas. It wasn't romance, at least not yet, but there was something there, a foundation of mutual respect and shared passion that Clara had never provided. Later, as Benjamin walked me to my car, I mentioned casually, "Professor Chen seems lovely." "She is," he agreed, then added quickly, "But it's not what you're thinking, Mum. We're colleagues. I'm not ready for anything like that, not yet." I didn't say a word, I replied innocently. "You didn't have to, I know that look." His smile faded slightly. "After Clara, I'm not sure I'll ever trust my judgment in relationships again." I stopped walking, turning to face him. "Benjamin, listen to me. What happened with Clara wasn't a failure of your judgment. She was extraordinarily skilled at deception, and you can't let her steal your future, along with everything else she tried to take. I know that intellectually," he sighed. "But emotionally, it takes time," I acknowledged. "Just don't close yourself off forever. That would be letting her win." As we reached my car, Benjamin hesitated, then asked, "Have you thought any more about the charitable foundation?" I had, in fact, been giving it considerable thought. After Clara's arrest, I'd begun researching organizations supporting victims of domestic abuse and poisoning, cases similar to Benjamin's that often went unrecognized until it was too late. "I've been working with Arthur on the paperwork," I confirmed. "We're calling it the Benjamin Wallace Foundation for Domestic Poisoning Awareness and Victim Support. Unless you object to your name being used." His eyes widened. "You're serious about this?" "Completely. Your experience could help save others, Benjamin. Medical professionals need better training to recognize the signs. Victims need resources to escape and recover." For a moment he was silent, processing the idea. Then he nodded slowly. "I'd be honored, and I'd like to be actively involved, not just lend my name." "I was hoping you'd say that," I smiled. "We can make something meaningful from this nightmare. Transform the poison into medicine, in a way." As I drove home, I reflected on how far we'd come in a year. From that terrifying moment in my office when David identified the arsenic, through the investigation, trial, and now to this new beginning. Benjamin was healing, finding purpose in education, and potentially a new relationship when he was ready. I was reconnecting with my passion for fragrance creation while building a legacy that would help others. Clara had tried to destroy us for her own gain, but instead, she had inadvertently set us on paths to greater purpose and deeper connection. There was poetic justice in that, I thought, transforming her evil intentions into positive change. That evening, I stood in my home laboratory, carefully blending essential oils for a new fragrance. After several attempts, I found the perfect balance. Bright, citrus top notes giving way to a warm, complex heart and a grounding base of sandalwood and amber. I titled it Rebirth. It seemed fitting for where we now stood, at the beginning of something new, something hopeful. Having survived the unimaginable, 2 years passed, each day taking us further from the shadow Clara had cast over our lives. Benjamin flourished in his new career, completing his master's program with honors and accepting a position teaching high school economics. Watching him interact with his students during an open house, patient, engaging, genuinely invested in their growth, I knew he had found his calling. The Benjamin Wallace Foundation grew steadily under our joint stewardship. What began as a small initiative focused on poisoning awareness expanded to include comprehensive support for victims of all forms of domestic abuse. Our annual fundraising gala became a notable event on the DC social calendar, with last year's auction raising over $500,000 for survivor support programs. On a personal level, my relationship with Benjamin deepened into something more balanced than the traditional mother-son dynamic. We were partners in healing, in building the foundation, in moving forward. I learned to step back, giving him space to navigate his own path, without my well-intentioned but sometimes smothering guidance. As for my company, I made the decision to scale back my involvement. The young executive I'd hired, Nadia Patel, had proven herself not just capable but visionary. Under her leadership, Essence of Margaret expanded into sustainable skincare products, reaching a younger demographic while maintaining the brand's reputation for quality. "You're really considering selling your majority stake?" Benjamin asked one Sunday as we strolled through the National Arboretum, the autumn leaves creating a canopy of gold and crimson above us. "Not selling," I corrected. transitioning. Nadia would become CEO, with me maintaining a creative director position and board seat. It's time, Benjamin. I'm 65 next month. I want to focus on the foundation, on creating new fragrances, because I love it, not because quarterly reports demand it. He considered this, his hands in the pockets of his jacket. You know, 2 years ago I would have felt guilty about this, like I was failing you by not taking over. And now I see how much happier we both are, following our own paths. A comfortable silence fell between us as we walked, broken only when Benjamin cleared his throat hesitantly. I wanted to tell you something. I've asked Olivia to move in with me. I tried and failed to hide my smile. Over the past year, Benjamin's professional relationship with Professor Chen had evolved predictably into romance. Olivia was everything Clara wasn't: genuine, straightforward, secure in herself. Most importantly, she respected Benjamin's journey, never rushing his cautious steps back into trust. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. She makes you happy. She does, he agreed, then added with a self-deprecating laugh, though I'm making her submit to a comprehensive background check and medical screening first. It was a joke, but only barely. The scars Clara left weren't just physical. Benjamin had worked extensively with his therapist on trust issues, and while he'd made remarkable progress, certain precautions remained. He no longer ate food he hadn't personally prepared or witnessed being made. He researched people thoroughly before allowing them into his inner circle. Small prices to pay for peace of mind. Reasonable, I nodded, playing along. And I assume you'll be randomly testing all food in the house for arsenic. Only on Tuesdays and Fridays, he replied with a grin, our ability to joke about the trauma, dark humor as a coping mechanism, was itself a sign of healing. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had transformed into something we could carry without being crushed beneath it. Later that week, I received an unexpected call from Inspector Carter, now Captain Carter, following his promotion. Ms. Wallace, his familiar voice greeted me. I hope you're well. Very well. Thank you, I replied, curious about the purpose of his call. We hadn't spoken since Clara's sentencing 2 years prior. I'm calling because there's been a development regarding Clara Wallace. His tone was carefully neutral. She was involved in an altercation at the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury. Another inmate attacked her. My breath caught. Is she? She survived but sustained serious injuries. She's currently in the prison. Medical facility. I absorbed this information, surprised by my own reaction. Not satisfaction or vindication, but a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't immediately identify. I understand this might be difficult news, Carter continued. I wanted you to hear it from me rather than through media reports. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. May I ask what prompted the attack? Carter hesitated. Apparently, Clara had been manipulating several inmates, creating conflicts between them for her own advantage. One woman discovered Clara had been stealing her prescription medication and confronted her. Even in prison, Clara remained Clara, manipulative, exploitative, willing to harm others for personal gain. The knowledge saddened me, not because I harbored any sympathy for her, but because it confirmed the depth of her pathology. Some people simply couldn't change. After thanking Carter for the information, I sat in my study for a long time, contemplating whether to tell Benjamin. Eventually I decided truth was always preferable to protection through omission, one of the many lessons we'd learned through our ordeal. When I called him that evening and shared the news, his reaction mirrored my own. Neither joy nor sorrow, but thoughtful acceptance. It's strange, he mused. I used to imagine scenarios like this, Clara suffering, facing consequences beyond prison walls. I thought it would feel satisfying, and it doesn't. No, he said softly. It just feels irrelevant. She doesn't have power over my emotions anymore. That's the real victory, isn't it? I think it is, I agreed, feeling a surge of pride in his wisdom. The truth was, Clara's current circumstances changed nothing about our reality. We had rebuilt our lives without reference to her, creating new meaning from the wreckage she'd left behind. Whether she suffered or thrived in prison was immaterial to our journey forward. 3 months later, I stood at the podium in a ballroom at the E. Adams Hotel, surveying the crowd gathered for the Benjamin Wallace Foundation's 3rd annual gala. Senators, philanthropists, medical professionals, and survivors filled the tables, united in support of our cause. 3 years ago, I began, My son nearly died at the hands of someone who had vowed to love him. Arsenic poisoning is an ancient method of murder, but domestic poisoning continues today, often undetected until it's too late. The foundation bearing my son's name has a simple mission: to ensure that no other family experiences what ours did. As I outlined our achievements, training programs for medical professionals, support services for survivors, educational initiatives for law enforcement, I caught Benjamin's eye from the front table. Beside him sat Olivia, elegant in midnight blue, her hand resting supportively on his. And now, I concluded, I'm honored to introduce the man whose courage inspired our work, my son, Benjamin Wallace. Applause filled the room as Benjamin approached the podium. Gone was the pale, shaking victim I'd rushed to the hospital 3 years before. In his place stood a confident, purposeful man. "Thank you, Mum," he said warmly before addressing the audience. When people hear my story, they often focus on the betrayal, the near-death experience, the dramatic courtroom showdown. A ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd. Our case had been extensively covered in the media. But what I hope you'll take away tonight is what came after: the healing, the rebuilding, the transformation of trauma into purpose. As Benjamin spoke, I surveyed the room again, this time noticing familiar faces among the crowd. David Miller, my former colleague whose medical knowledge had saved Benjamin's life, now served on our medical advisory board. Inspector, now Captain, Carter had become a staunch supporter, implementing our training materials throughout the DC Metropolitan Police Department. Dr. Roberts, from the University of Maryland Medical Center, had developed a specialized protocol for identifying poisoning cases in emergency settings, already credited with saving lives. Survival isn't just about escaping danger, Benjamin was saying. It's about reclaiming joy, trust, and purpose. The Foundation's work isn't just about preventing poisoning, it's about helping survivors rebuild their lives afterward. The room erupted in applause as Benjamin introduced our keynote speaker, a survivor whose story paralleled his own. As he returned to his seat, Olivia leaned over, whispering something that made him smile. The simple intimacy of the moment, his ease with her, the evident trust, was perhaps the most powerful testament to his healing. Later, as the event wound down, Benjamin pulled me aside. "Mum, there's something else I wanted to tell you, but I was waiting for the right moment." From his serious expression, my mind immediately jumped to health concerns. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right," he assured me quickly. "Olivia and I are engaged." Joy surged through me. "Benjamin, that's wonderful news. We're planning a small ceremony in the spring," he continued. "Just family and close friends. And I wanted to ask—" He paused, suddenly looking boyishly uncertain. "Would you help design a signature fragrance for the wedding? Something that represents new beginnings?" Tears pricked my eyes. It was more than a request for a perfume. It was Benjamin embracing both his future and our shared past, integrating all parts of his journey. "I would be honored," I managed, embracing him. As guests departed and the hotel staff began clearing tables, I found myself standing alone by the windows overlooking Lafayette Square. The White House gleamed in the distance, its lights a beacon against the night sky. So much had changed in 3 years. Pain transformed into purpose, near tragedy into triumph, fear into hard-won peace. "Penny, for your thoughts?" I turned to find David beside me, offering a glass of champagne. "Just reflecting on how far we've come," I replied, accepting the glass. "Sometimes I still wake up and can't believe that day in the office really happened, that you saw what no one else had noticed for years." "Right place, right time," he demurred, "though I've often wondered what would have happened if you hadn't grabbed the wrong lunch that day." The question had haunted me too. "I try not to think about that," I admitted. "The what-ifs are too terrifying." David nodded, understanding. After a moment he asked, "Have you heard about Clara recently?" "Yes," I sighed. "Still manipulating, still causing harm. Some people don't change, I suppose." "While others," David countered, gesturing toward Benjamin and Olivia, deep in conversation with Captain Carter, "grow beyond what anyone could have imagined." As the evening concluded, Benjamin and Olivia insisted on driving me home. Outside my apartment building, Benjamin helped me from the car, then hesitated. "Thank you, Mom," he said simply, "for everything. For saving my life, for standing by me, for helping me find my way back." I cupped his face in my hands. this miracle of a son who had survived the unimaginable. We saved each other, I corrected gently, and we'll keep doing so every day. As I watched their car pull away, I felt a profound sense of rightness settle over me. We had not merely survived Clara's attempt to destroy us, we had transformed because of it. Our wounds had become wisdom, our pain had become purpose, our fear had become fierce determination to protect others, and in that transformation lay the truest victory of all. 5 years to the day after that fateful Monday morning, when David discovered arsenic in Benjamin's lunchbox, I stood in the garden of my new home in Virginia, pruning roses in the gentle spring sunshine. The property, a charming colonial with sprawling grounds just outside Alexandria, had been an impulsive purchase 3 years earlier. A clean slate, away from the apartment in D.C. that held too many difficult memories. Gran, look what I found. 4-year-old Thomas came running across the lawn, his small hands cupped around a treasure. My grandson skidded to a stop before me, dark eyes, so like his father's, wide with excitement. "What have you discovered, explorer?" I asked, setting aside my garden shears. He opened his hands to reveal a perfect robin's egg, vivid blue against his palm. "It was under the big tree. Can we keep it?" "It's beautiful," I agreed, "but I think we should return it to where you found it. The mama bird will be looking for it." His little face scrunched in consideration before nodding solemnly. "Okay, we can visit it, though." "Absolutely. We'll check on it every day." Thomas grinned, revealing the gap where his front tooth had recently fallen out, then carefully carried his treasure back toward the oak tree. I watched him go, marveling as always at the perfect miracle of him, this child who had healed something in all of us. "He found the egg, I see," Benjamin remarked, emerging from the house with a tray of lemonade. At 39, my son had settled into himself, the trauma of his past, visible only in the occasional faraway look in his eyes, the subtle caution with which he approached unfamiliar food. "Third time this week," I chuckled, accepting a glass. "He's determined to catalogue every creature on the property." "Just like his grandmother," Olivia commented, joining us on the patio, 7-month-old Lily sleeping against her shoulder, "always collecting natural specimens for new inspiration." It was true. My second career as an artisanal perfumer, creating small-batch fragrances from botanical elements I grew myself, had proven unexpectedly fulfilling. After transitioning leadership of Essence of Margaret to Nadia, I'd established a modest studio in what had once been the property's carriage house. There I crafted unique scents for private clients, each bottle containing elements harvested from my own gardens. Benjamin settled into a chair beside me, his gaze following his son's careful progress across the lawn. 5 years, he mused, aware of the anniversary without needing to state it directly. Sometimes it feels like another lifetime. In many ways it was, I agreed softly. So much had changed in those 5 years. Benjamin and Olivia had married. In a simple ceremony in the Georgetown University chapel, surrounded by friends who had supported them through the aftermath of Clara's crimes. A year later, Thomas was born, named after Benjamin's father, bringing a joy that seemed to finally complete the circle of healing. The Benjamin Wallace Foundation had grown into a nationally recognized non-profit, its programs implemented in hospitals and police departments across the country. Benjamin remained involved as board chairman, though his primary focus had shifted to his family and his teaching career, where he had recently been named department head at his high school. As for Clara, she remained in federal prison, having lost all appeals. The inmate who attacked her had inflicted permanent damage, leaving Clara partially paralyzed on her right side. I had felt a complicated mixture of emotions upon learning this, not satisfaction, but a sense that the universe had its own form of justice. She had tried to rob Benjamin of his physical capabilities through poison. Now she experienced similar limitations herself. We received occasional updates about her from the correctional system, as victims are entitled to be informed about their perpetrator's status. She had apparently become religious in prison, though the prison chaplain had private doubts about the sincerity of her conversion. Clara would be eligible for parole in another 13 years, though given the high-profile nature of her crime and her behavior in prison, release seemed unlikely. "Mom, are you with us?" Benjamin's voice pulled me from my reflections. "Sorry. Just wool gathering," I smiled. "What were you saying?" "I was asking if you've decided about David's offer." "Ah, David. Our relationship had evolved slowly over the years, from colleagues to friends to something more. At 72 to my 67, he had recently proposed, not marriage but partnership, a sharing of our lives, our homes, our remaining years. I'm leaning toward yes, I admitted, feeling a pleasant warmth that had nothing to do with the spring sunshine. He's patient, kind, and he makes me laugh. At our age, what more could I want? He's also completely smitten with you, Olivia pointed out with a smile. Has been for years, if you ask me. Well, we've both outlived first spouses, raised our children, built careers, I reflected. There's something freeing about beginning a relationship at this stage of life. No dynastic pressures, no biological clocks, just two people choosing each other's company. Benjamin reached over to squeeze my hand. You deserve happiness, Mum. After everything. The afternoon unfolded peacefully. Thomas eventually tired of egg-watching and demanded stories. I sat with him on my lap in the shade of the porch, reading from his favorite book while Benjamin and Olivia prepared dinner. Lily awakened and was passed to me, her tiny fingers grasping at my necklace while Thomas helped by turning pages with exaggerated importance. These ordinary moments, so precious, so nearly stolen from us, were the true measure of our victory over Clara's machinations. Not the successful foundation, not the professional accomplishments, not even the justice served in court, but this, the simple ability to gather as a family, to create new memories untainted by fear. Later that evening, after the children were asleep, and Benjamin and Olivia had returned to their own home 10 minutes away, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. The phone call, when it came, was unexpected. Ms. Wallace, this is Chaplain Richardson from FCI Danbury. I straightened, instantly alert. Yes? Has something happened with Clara? In a manner of speaking, the chaplain replied, her voice gentle. She's been diagnosed with advanced pancreatic cancer. The prognosis is poor, perhaps 6 months. She's asked if you would accept a letter from her. I sat in stunned silence, emotions colliding like storm fronts. Clara dying. Clara wanting contact after all these years. Miss Wallace, are you there? Yes, I managed. I'm just processing. Did she say why she wants to write to me specifically? Not to Benjamin. She was clear it should be you. Something about being the only one who would understand. I should mention that all correspondence would be reviewed by prison officials and her treatment team. This wouldn't open a door to manipulation. I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted to refuse, to deny Clara any connection to our lives after the devastation she'd caused. But another part, the part that had learned the true value of closure through our foundation work with other survivors, recognized this for what it might be, a final chapter. I'll accept the letter, I decided, but I make no promises about responding. Understood, the chaplain said. Thank you for your consideration. After ending the call, I sat for a long time in the growing darkness, contemplating the complex emotions Clara still evoked. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Benjamin immediately, rather than waiting for a better time to share difficult news. Our relationship had evolved into one of radical honesty. No more protective omissions, no more sheltering each other from harsh realities. We had learned the hard way that secrets, even well-intentioned ones, could fester. Clara is dying, I said simply when he answered. Pancreatic cancer. She wants to write to me. Benjamin was quiet for a moment. How do you feel about that? Conflicted, I admitted. But I think I'll read what she has to say. Do you want me to come over? No, stay with your family. I'm okay, truly. I just wanted you to know. Call me after you receive it. Any time, day or night. I will, I promised. Clara's letter arrived a week later. The prison envelope stark and institutional. I opened it on my porch, the same place I'd received the chaplain's call, feeling it was important to keep this final interaction with Clara contained, separate from the sanctuary of my home's interior. Dear Margaret, I imagine you're surprised to hear from me after all this time. I wouldn't blame you if you burned this letter unread, but the doctors tell me I have little time left and there are things I feel compelled to say to you, specifically. First, I won't insult your intelligence with claims of remorse I don't fully feel. The truth is more complicated. I recognize that what I did was wrong, and yet part of me still feels justified in having tried. That's the broken part of me speaking, the part that's never been able to see the world as others do. What I can say with complete honesty is that I've had 5 years to reflect on who you are, Margaret. You were never the controlling mother-in-law I portrayed in court. You were perceptive. You sensed something was wrong with me from the beginning, didn't you? A mother's instinct that I underestimated. I've thought often about that Monday morning when you took the wrong lunch. Was it really an accident, or was some greater force at work? I'm not religious, despite what the chaplain believes, but I've come to think there was a kind of cosmic justice in how I was caught. You should know that Benjamin was never the primary target of my resentment. It was you. Your success, your confidence, the empire you built from nothing. I wanted what you had, and I couldn't create it for myself. Taking it seemed easier. I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to understand that in my distorted way I admired you. Perhaps that's why I hated you too. The doctors say the cancer is aggressive. There's a symmetry there that doesn't escape me. Poison in my body, just as I put poison in Benjamin's. Another cosmic balancing of accounts. I have no right to ask anything of you, but I hope you'll tell Benjamin something for me. I'm glad he survived. I'm glad he found happiness. In my clearest moments, I can see that the world is better with him in it. Clara. I folded the letter carefully, returned it to its envelope, and sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. Clara's words settled into me, not with the sharp pain they might once have caused, but with a strange, sad understanding. She was right about one thing. I had sensed something amiss from the beginning, an instinct I'd ignored in favor of politeness and hope. It was a mistake I would never make again. Later that evening, I called Benjamin and read him the letter. His response, after a long silence, was measured. It's as close to honesty as she's capable of, he observed. Not quite remorse, but recognition at least. Will you want to see her? I asked. Before the end. No, he said with certainty. My life with Clara ended the day you found the arsenic. What happens to her now is separate from our story. I understood his choice completely. Clara had forfeited any claim to Benjamin's time or emotional energy. His focus belonged to his present and future, to Olivia, Thomas, and Lily. The next morning I walked the perimeter of my property, gathering botanicals for a new fragrance project. Wild roses, lavender, cedar bark, and a hint of sweet grass found their way into my basket. In my studio, I began the meticulous process of extraction and blending, losing myself in the precise sensory work. The resulting scent was unexpected, not bitter or dark as I might have created years ago while still in pain, nor overly sweet or simplistic. Instead, it was complex, evolving on the skin from bright, clear notes to a rich, multidimensional heart before settling into a grounding base with surprising depth. I named it transmutation. 2 months later, we received word that Clara had died sooner than expected. The prison chaplain called to inform us, as was protocol, but there was no funeral to attend, no final decisions to make. Clara had arranged for cremation, her ashes to be scattered by a distant cousin, her only remaining family connection. Benjamin and I marked the news not with celebration or mourning, but with a quiet dinner at my house, joined by Olivia and the children. We didn't speak of Clara directly, but as Thomas chatted about kindergarten and Lily practiced her newfound crawling skills across my living room floor, the significance of the day hung gently in the air between the adults, an unspoken acknowledgement that a chapter had definitively closed. After dinner, as Benjamin helped me clear the table, he paused, a stack of plates in his hands. I've been thinking, he said, about how to explain all this to Thomas when he's older, about Clara, about what happened. And, I prompted gently, I think I'll tell him the truth in age-appropriate ways, that someone I trusted tried to hurt me, but that love, yours and later Olivia's, helped me heal, that sometimes terrible things happen, but they don't have to define us. I nodded, feeling a surge of pride in the man he had become. That sounds perfect. Later, as the family prepared to leave, Thomas ran back to give me one final hug. Gran, I forgot to tell you, the egg hatched. There's a baby bird now. Is there? That's wonderful news, I said, kneeling to his level. Life finds a way, doesn't it? Yep, he agreed enthusiastically, though I knew he didn't grasp the deeper meaning behind my words. As they drove away, I returned to my porch, breathing in the night air scented with honeysuckle and distant rain, the journey from that terrifying Monday morning in my office to this peaceful evening had been long and often painful. Yet here we were, not merely surviving, but thriving, building new lives from the ashes of what Clara had tried to destroy. I thought of Benjamin's words to Thomas, the wisdom he had distilled from our experience. Terrible things happen, but they don't have to define us. Clara had intended my son's death to be her path to wealth and status. Instead, her actions had ultimately led to greater purpose and deeper connections than we might otherwise have found. The foundation helped hundreds of victims each year. Benjamin had discovered his true calling as an educator. I had reclaimed my passion for perfumery and opened my heart to new love with David. In trying to destroy us, Clara had inadvertently set us on paths to our truest selves. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent toast to unexpected journeys, to second chances, to the mysterious ways that even our deepest wounds can transform into our greatest gifts. To survival, yes, but more importantly, to the meaningful life we build afterward. The wrong lunchbox on a Monday morning had changed everything, but in the end, it had changed us for the better.